taped?
No, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
guys need to start over.
All right,
This
let's
seems
go.
to be like,
you know what the whole book is
this
about.
seems to be like a separate,
Yeah.
separate discussion.
Yeah, is it a
Yeah,
historical?
we're
we're
not discussing this book and debating it. We're just looking at the form. So can we concentrate on the form that you know the books, but we just really want to study.
Yeah, well, I think there's
the form without.
opinions
There is
being
opinion, but we
presented
don't
as
need-
facts, as though this is exactly what he was trying to accomplish. This is a theory that is presented by a certain set of authors, who other authors say may have a counter-argument. But if it becomes then a kind of dogma, if this becomes a dogma and there's no question, and nobody can question this, that I don't think that's kind of...
Are you objecting to what Mark is saying, or are you objecting to what he wrote, what Steiner wrote? What's the opinion that's being expressed as fact and dogma?
That one, I mean, we can go through this. Taking apart somebody's writing and saying that's the work of the heart. A lot of that is done. If I read a writing, the form is something often that's silent. You don't necessarily need to take apart the form to understand what the ideas are seeking to convey.
But it seems like with Steiner we do, because...
But you don't know the writing. See, this is the problem, is you're taking apart somebody's preface, and you don't know the ideas that he's trying to convey, and it's all disjointed.
Well, I think if I understood this was there's two ways of reading. One is logical, and you're already going to get that because that's habitual. What we're focusing on is the thing that's not habitual. So yeah, we're spending time taking it apart so then we can read at two levels.
Yeah,
I'm wrong about that,
I kind of
correct?
feel a little bit like calling him a terrible writer, and that the ideas that you're saying aren't important. Other writers have said these things before.
Well, it's in the preface. It's in the goddamn preface, and you don't read carefully, and you make conclusions that you're scholarly, but you're not. Go to sentence.
No, I've studied his writing.
No, it doesn't matter if you study his
me.
writing. Look at what he says, and then argue with him, not with me.
Well,
This book
you don't need to
does not
personally attack
contain any specific spiritual results, any more than it contains specific results of other fields of knowledge. So it doesn't contain any results of his spiritual stuff.
No,
it doesn't. It just says that. But you have to. I'm a literalist,
Yes.
and you're making up.
No,
You're
right.
doing a personal
Can I-
attack to me because you're not letting us finish the preface.
Can we-
You have an ad hominem yourself because you're saying I'm taking it apart when all I'm doing is reading it.
No, but
And you're preventing us from reading it with your theoretical stuff, which he says in sentence 2 is not about theory. You
But
don't need
that-
a historical past. He says, I quote sentence 2.
I know.
I have to do this because you're not listening to what Steiner says. There is no theoretical answer given. Once acquired, can be carried about as a conviction merely preserved in the memory. If you're talking about the history of Western philosophy, that's in your memory. You're not creating anything new.
Okay.
You're telling everybody here they don't have the foundation of Rudolf Steiner to talk to you. So
No,
therefore,
I'm not saying-
that's the ad hominem argument.
No.
Yes, that's an ad hominem argument
down.
because you're not letting them read what's
Calm
there.
down.
I'm telling you, you're telling me to calm down, but you made an ad hominem argument not only to me, but to everybody else.
What the logical form is. I would disagree, again, if say this
All
is
right.
sentence 9, let me just...
I mean,
let me
I
just
like to
say-
raise my points.
Let me just say real quick.
Can I just say something, please?
Yes.
I respect that you may have a different opinion of Mark, and that's fine. But we're here to listen to Mark's talk and let him speak.
You're
And-
also
but-
you're also guests here. All of you are guests here.
Yes, and okay, and then you have a right to your opinion, and we've heard it
Okay.
a lot. So
Well,
then now we would like
one
to
more
just
thing I would
carry
like to
on
say
it.
is that there can also be an attempt to impress a particular way of looking at it, and then not allowing a difference of opinion.
But
And
we've
present-
heard your opinion for a long time. We've heard it. So now can we move on?
Julian, I gotta agree with
We
him.
wanted
It's,
to
what
get
you're
the
doing is
point
going
of
off the
view
subject
before
that we gathered here for. So we could talk about that some other
but I
time.
felt that if I've worked through this thing quite a bit, and what I've heard a number of people is saying that this is philosophy, and the philosophy, is complex ideas he's bringing through. And when all of the form is all that's important, and people then are struggling with philosophical ideas, and they're saying those aren't important because he's a terrible writer.
But Julian, you got to let this go. This is new for most of, at least me. But I mean, I'm just saying, like.
Well, this was at the very beginning. It was said that he's a terrible writer, and these ideas are all kind of jumbled because he's trying to fit a form.
Wait. We're learning. Okay, how about you do a presentation, invite us back next week. That will be the subject, and if I take it off of the focus of that you want to set, that would be a violation of what we gathered here for. That would be rude. I shouldn't do that. Right now, we just want to have Mark's kind of take, and then you can offer, invite us back, and take, you know, a different view. I would be interested in that. But right now, it's just taken away from what we're trying to do. So I'm sorry. I hear other people saying the same thing. So let's talk about it after. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go to paragraph 2, and we'll go through it systematically because for whatever reason this isn't flowing so well. Did you want to?
It's on.
Oh, it's been on the whole time?
Well, I mean, that was good stuff. You guys, I was learning a lot from you.
Oh, maybe we'll have to
Both
not
y'all.
take this, but publish this. Okay, let's go through it. So I'll read it out loud. We'll take notes. So the view, which is under discussion here, in reference to these two questions, presents itself as one that once attained can be integrated as a member of the truly living soul life. So there's a view, right, that he writes about in the book, in reference to the two questions, right, that it can be part.
Once it's attained.
Yeah, once it's attained, so you have to attain the view and part of a living soul life, which it's not yet, right? So it's the future. Then he says, there is no theoretical answer given that, once acquired, can be carried about as a conviction merely preserved in the memory. So this is the wrong answer. It's a wrong answer if it's memorized.
I'm sorry, is this what is this what you guys got?
Yeah.
Oh.
So this is paragraph 2. We'll just go through it.
But this is what they pulled out of it?
Somewhat, yeah.
We were discussing that.
Okay, I was working on mine. I didn't hear what y'all talked about.
Right.
Okay.
Sentence 3, this kind of answer. So what is this kind, right? It's a theoretical answer would only be illusory for the type of thinking which is the foundation of this book. So what is at the foundation of the book? A type of thinking. So if there's a type of thinking, what type of thinking is that if it can't be memorized? If there's a view that can't be memorized, then what is that? Is it a view like we normally think of a view? Is it a world view, or is it a way of thinking that is at the foundation of the book?
Does he discuss that before?
Well, he discusses it in the next sentence, right? He says, not such a finished fixed answer is given, rather a definite region of soul experience. So a region. So imagine your soul has different regions. And a region that we normally don't use is this place. It's a new region of your soul. And this region doesn't use memory in the normal sense of the word. Is referred to in which one may, through the inner activity of the soul itself, answer these questions livingly new at any moment he requires. So it's a region of the soul where you answer the questions again. What are the questions? Am I free, right? So how do you know if you're free or not? Do you have to ask yourself? So Steiner said you have 3 souls, basically, right? Your feeling soul, your intellectual soul, and your consciousness soul. If you're able to live in this consciousness soul that has no content, because there's nothing to memorize, your consciousness soul has an activity. Mm-hmm. This higher soul, the spiritual soul, has an activity. You know you're free. You don't need to ask someone. Why? Because you're not thinking any content. If you're not thinking content, what are you thinking?
It's an awareness more. It sounds like an awareness more than words or a learning or.
Right. You're thinking in pure living form.
So like you're in the world, not of the world. You're in the conversation, but not of the conversation.
For example, music is the best analogy. Are the notes important? No, it's the notes in combination. So it's not like the content is not important. It's just the content and movement is what we're talking about. And music is the best analogy. Because in music, you're working with pure form. How one note relates to the other in combination. And so in thinking, it's not what he says, but how you approach it with that particular soul.
And did you approach it, your approach will change, or when you're thinking about it will change as you
It's like if you practice your scales on your piano, eventually you can play anything. So it's kind of the same principle. If you practice this book, first you read the content, then you compare how the content is related, and then you go through it musically, backwards, sideways, the 4 laws of the living. So polarity, turning inside out. You basically rewrite your own philosophy of freedom.
Okay, so he's trying to get there through the mental path?
It's a kind of mental path.
I don't
First of
object
all,
to it, I'm just
right.
asking.
But there's the kind of the breathing aspect that goes with it.
Breathing?
Sure, you have each paragraph, let's say there's different ways of working with this. But if you're working with pure form, even with the Our Father prayer, you're breathing in between each line. There's a certain rhythm. There are different qualities. When you come to the midpoint, you're turning inside out. That's a feeling experience, not just a mental one. So you're bringing these qualities to your soul, first in your mind. You're interrelating things. So for example, so here we have, what's the interrelationship between sentence 2 and 4, right?
Oh,
So they both have to do with the answer. So in the comparison and moving back and forth through these ideas, you're setting up your own mind to have the ability to think like he did. So when Steiner wrote this book, he wrote it down. In other words, Steiner could see the whole book, all its chapters and
Right.
paragraphs. And from that view of the entire book, he started to write it down.
Did he really write the book in this structure?
Yeah.
The same structure? There's
Same
a middle
structure.
chapter.
He could see it first,
Right.
and then it was in his mind's eye. Imagine that, if your own writing, seeing 15 chapters with prefaces all at once and being able to write them down. And that's why he's so prolific. He had this amazing ability to just recombine and bring things into form, into content.
Kind of like in a way it was already written as far as he just needed to actually write it out.
Yeah, he just really, but he worked so hard to really see that, to have that experience. And that's something new.
Okay.
So what he's bringing the world is something completely new.
I want to skip just way ahead here. So let's assume that I think I understand now what you're doing with this. Bring people to an awareness within themselves. You correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it works, but are you telling me that it works?
Okay, so let's say jumping ahead for now.
Oh, you could.
I'll go with that. So let's say you have your what, how, why, who. It's not just information, but it's different perspectives. So first you have the 2 questions. Then you move to the living answer, and then you move to some kind of soul experience. That's how Steiner wrote it. When you think in that order, it starts to vibrate your different bodies. Your physical, etheric, astral body. So your aura becomes into a vibration. That harmonizes your bodies. So he wrote this book, so it would kind of be, did you ever just see to hear a really great piece of music and it touches you?
Mm-hmm.
Like you really become a better person or more productive or you fall in love? It opens something in you. And that was the purpose of this book, was to open up your soul. And by doing that, also a lot of your junk would start coming up. And so there's a double process. By being able to think in these movements also gives you the ability to see energy fields, to experience so-called psychic phenomena, have direct knowledge. So the book is interesting. In that point of view, that's its purpose, is to open you up spiritually. it's a weird way to do it. You know, he has other books where he actually writes about spiritual things. But in this book, it's pretty strictly
But you like this way.
What's that?
You like this way. You spend a lot of time
Yeah.
studying and presenting and your own.
Well, when I
book on
started
this thing.
very early on, within 2 years, I was shocked. We were in a study group and people were having spiritual experiences very quickly. People could already see astral bodies. It was all the kind of promise just by studying a couple of chapters. The problem is that there wasn't the grounding for that. So a lot of people went a little loopy. So this book is very powerful if you study it properly. If you just read it, then it's a memorized answer.
So are you saying instead of reading it, you spend time taking apart the chapters and kind of attune yourself to the form in each?
Well, you need to
Of
know the
the writing?
content pretty much cold.
Oh,
the
okay.
difference is you put it in your own words. So for example, when you would study in a group or by yourself, this would be something in very longish form. Now you say, how could I learn 37 paragraphs? Well, you will learn them. You start an artistic method. You know, first you make little catchwords for each paragraph, and then you tell stories. You go, in the first paragraph, Steiner talks about 2 questions related to the human soul life. The first question has to do with how we view the human being. The second one has to do with freedom. Both the questions are interrelated if you find the soul realm, which they all unfold. And then, if you're looking how to answer these 2 questions, so you retell the thought form in your own words. And that also creates energy. So normally after you study it, you actually get pretty high because it stimulates your bodies. So yeah, this was, this is, so to say, not a game. That's why we have those forms in the church. That was the purpose of the Our Father prayer, even the early Catholic Mass, certain songs, poems. That was to open the human being up. So Steiner thought, instead of putting it in the poetic form or musical form, he put it in a philosophical form. But didn't have to be. He also wrote plays. He tried everything to teach this thinking. So, you can benefit on some level, just from participating, but if you really want to have that experience, you have to go into a meditative part. And the meditative method is really kind of musical. You're repeating the notes back and forth. And then, Steiner said, do it 50 times, then go on to the next chapter. So it's no different than learning piano or any other skill, karate, except this is supposed to be a spiritual skill. If that makes any sense. Right?
Did you guys know that? Did you guys already know that?
No.
Oh, okay, so this is new to me, so I feel like I'm behind everybody else.
No.
Did you know that, Kate?
No. Well, I did the foundation year at the Walden School,
Oh,
so I
okay.
studied about it.
Okay.
And the philosophy of freedom is my favorite.
The man who discovered
But
this...
I don't know it, it's something
No,
that you keep.
Did you know that experience? Have you experienced that thing he was talking about? No?
I don't know. I have in different ways, so I don't know if it was necessarily
Okay.
But the book, it would be great to study.
Yeah, it's a fun book.
I really like the idea of working with imagination and kind of the drawing. I think is definitely, I imagine what he's seeking to do, to move away from like this, not Roman, but like a style of writing that's so linear and fixed and stagnant, even in a lot of modern education. It does seem much more dynamic, kind of bringing study that's done in a more engaged way.
Yeah.
Versus kind of just regurgitating information.
See, I mean, that's why I like the study group, because when we studied this way, I've been maybe in about 5 different groups that did it this way. You always brought something to the group. See, normally when people study Steiner, they sit in a circle and they read out loud. When you come to a group like this, you come prepared and you give presentations.
Yeah, I didn't do it like that.
Yeah.
We studied and read it.
Right, and you have some ownership of the material. So when people tell me I don't know anything about content or something like that, or the content's not important, Well, it's not important when you know it. When you don't know it, of course it's important, right? Because how are you going to get to the form without the content? You know, they're mutually supportive. So, yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. Yeah, but what is wonderful about the group is when people get together and reproduce these thought forms, they do have power. And George O'Neill, I'm not at this stage, but George O'Neill said, so let's say you have your thought form, let's say with the Blake poem. It looks something like this. George O'Neill said, if you keep going through that poem back and forth, eventually you're going to see through the poem, and behind that poem is a spiritual being. And you come into intercourse, let's say, with that spiritual being. So any great piece of literature, you know, if you read a spiritual book, Kabbalah or something like that, they'll always say they're immersing themselves in this book, and all of a sudden, you know, the scales fall from their eyes and they see reality, right? That's a similar experience. Except in my case, I didn't go through the thought form. I just woke up one morning and you can see people's energy fields. What Steiner had said, you know, it's the purpose of his work, right? It's to open yourself up spiritually, or see into people's past lives. You know, it's just, you know, it's one way to stimulate it if you don't have that capacity. That's what the book is really there for. It's not, you know, it doesn't give you directions on how to live, because all he does is talk about different philosophies, right? So, anyways, sentence 5. The true view of this region will give the one who eventually finds the soul sphere, where these questions unfold, that which he needs for these two riddles of life, so that he may, so empowered, enter further into the widths and depths of this enigmatic human life, into which need and destiny impel him to wander. So what's the main topic in sentence 5?
What the view does for you in living life.
Okay, so what the view, right, once incorporated, does for your human life, right? It changes your destiny. And so now, if you, oops, should have done something lower. So if you sketch this out, what are our polarities? So 1 and 5 are about what?
The view.
Right, the view, right? So the view separate and the view incorporated, right? So you have destiny changing. And, you know, also, I mean, to give some support to what Julian's saying, is this actually facilitates content learning, right? Because you begin to see not only interrelationship, but how the parts relate to the whole. I never left a sentence out. You know, it's not like I make up my own thing. I'm breaking it down in terms of how it was written. Now, you could disagree with my how or George's how. It's not mine. I learned it. And you have the answer that's not theoretical, and then you have the answer that's an interactivity, right? Now, what is sentence 3? How is that the astral level, the Y level?
That's where it inverts. You reach this point through thinking.
Yeah, exactly. You reach this point through a new thinking, right? And this thinking is like Steiner said, it's a heart thinking. It's not a head thinking. There's nothing to memorize. There's only movement.
The whole sentence has that character too.
Which character?
Of being not, it's like not such finished, fixed, but a region.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's. Now, if we had to sum up paragraph 2.5, what would the essence of that sentence, paragraph be?
Which one?
I'm sorry. If we had to make a condensement over here, so we have paragraph 1, 2 questions, freedom and view. What would paragraph 2 be?
An understanding of the view will change your destiny.
Now see, that is a synopsis I wouldn't use, but that doesn't matter. That's what the group is for. You begin to hear how other people see it, and it's not wrong. It's understanding the view correctly. And what did you say the rest was?
A destiny changes your destiny.
Changes your destiny. I wouldn't have written that. And that's part of the group, is you learn to hear the same content through other people's words. And when you're able to hear the same content, even though people use different words, do you know how many fights you avoid? Because you're actually listening to what the person says. And this taught me, very early on, I stopped, basically, just listen to what people say. And you'd be surprised they actually agree with you and you're still fighting, right? Maybe that's what happened tonight at some point, but understanding view changes destiny. What should Steiner talk about in paragraph 3? What level is paragraph 3?
So that would be.
So if there's 6 paragraphs, where would level 3 be? What would the form look like? Possibly.
Would there be? Oh, it would be 1, 6, 2, 5, and 3, 4. Would that be right?
Yeah. All right, so far we have this. We have 1, 9 is the what, 2, 5 is the how, 3, 1 should talk about what?
Oh, I see.
This is 4.
Okay, what should it talk about? What's
This
it
is
again?
4.
3.
Oh,
Just out of a feeling experience.
The
So
goal?
here he has,
The
yeah, it
goal.
should be the goal. Okay. So here we have 2 questions. Here we have a living answer. And then what could this be, right? So let's read it out loud. A kind of knowledge seems thereby to be pointed to, which through its own inner life, and by the connectedness of this inner life to the whole life of the human soul, proves its validity and usefulness. What on earth does that mean? A kind of knowledge seems to be pointed to by whom? Who's pointing?
Well,
Right, the author, right?
the author, but your inner life changes.
Yeah, so is it your inner life? The knowledge
it
has
also
an inner
changes-
life, right?
Yeah, but it also changes the people around you.
Okay, and how does it change? Well, wait, does it change the people around you in this case?
Because it says the life of, it changes the world as a whole by by
Read it again.
deepening your own inner life.
Okay, so if you, a kind of knowledge is pointed to which the knowledge's inner life and connectedness of the knowledge's inner life to your whole human soul. This relationship of the knowledge inner life to your human soul proves its value. So how can a knowledge have an inner life?
I mean, it depends, I guess, on what you mean by knowledge. To me, I mean, I'm relating that more to an awareness that you have.
Okay.
But I mean, if you actually mean a learning knowledge that you memorize,
No, right?
because you already said it's not a memory thing, that's why I didn't think it was that.
So it's a living knowledge, not a dead knowledge that you memorize. So if you have this living knowledge, it's really useful.
So I would expect any genuine Steiner's person who's followed this to have more of a sense of, or a living knowledge. If it's really been working for them, I expect to have a living knowledge rather than just memorization.
Right.
Rather than just repeating the things that the philosophy has taught them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it can't be theoretical.
Right.
So you can't apply what you knew yesterday until tomorrow.
Right.
Okay.
Because it would be, I mean, this thing should be fluid and it should be apropos to each moment, not just recitation.
Right.
Okay.
That's cool, right? We're all cool with that? Alright, paragraph 4. Are you guys still okay?
Yeah?
We can make it through?
Yeah.
Alright. If you want to take a break, let me know. So it's a useful knowledge that's, as we know, is not theoretical. Okay. Paragraph 4 has how many sentences? 10. How do you want to do paragraph 4? All 10 sentences?
Whose was 4?
What's that?
Who had
This
4?
one, yeah, it was mine.
Oh,
Did
okay.
you find anything in there?
I noted the similar agreement between the first and 10th and the second and 9th.
Okay.
And then this is going to the middle again between 5 and 6.
And how are 5 and 6 related? Okay, let me do what you said, because I like that, even though I'm going to change it just a little.
Okay.
Because there's truth in what you said. So Julian said he found something connected between 1 and 10, 2 and 9. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, let's try this. Could you read the first sentence of paragraph 1?
This is what I thought about the content of the book when I wrote it down 25 years ago.
Okay, so content, and what year is 25 years ago?
So it would be 1893.
Yeah, 1893. And when did the anthroposophists celebrate the anniversary of the philosophy of freedom? The 100th anniversary? 1894. Even though in the preface, and this is what I'm telling you, they don't read, right? They don't read even the preface to the book. Steiner said that the book was finished in 1893, but they celebrated his book in 1994. Can't make that up. Big celebration in Weimar, Germany. Okay, so content 1893. Sentence 2, Kate?
Today, too, I have to write down such sentences if I want to characterize the purpose of the thoughts of this book.
One's today.
1918.
So 1918, the idea, right? Or thoughts. Characterize such thoughts. Next one, number 3. Ed, would you do me a favor?
At the original writing, I limited myself to say no more than that, which in the utmost closest sense is connected with the 2 basic questions referred to here.
Okay, so he said nothing except about freedom and the view, right? So, limited 2 questions. I know right now this doesn't seem like much, but you'll feel this out. And you can see why Julian's right about his connection to 9-1. Sentence 4, Marquis.
If someone should be amazed now
Mm-hmm.
that he finds in the book no reference to that region of the world of spiritual experience which came to expression in my later writings, he should bear in mind that in those days I did not, however, want to give a description of results of spiritual research, but I wanted to build first the foundation on which such results would rest.
Okay, what kind of results are those? Are they philosophical, or what kind of results?
Feeling result, don't they?
No, but what science are they talking about?
Spiritual?
Yeah. So there's no spirit results, right?
Oh.
Because in the early career he was talking philosophy and Goethe. In his later career he was talking more spiritual things, reincarnation, etc. Right? Sentence 5. Andrew?
This philosophy of freehood does not contain any such specific spiritual results any more than it contains. Sorry, read this from here. This philosophy of freehood does not contain any such specific spiritual results any more than it contains specific results of other fields of knowledge. But he who strives to attain certainty for such cognition cannot, in my view, ignore that which it does indeed contain.
So it gives certainty for what? Spiritual or regular scientific results? Or other fields of knowledge, for example. And in good American English, that's just science, right? The philosophy of freedom does not contain any such specific results, meaning spiritual ones, right? Any more than it contains specific results of other fields of knowledge. So it has no spiritual results, and it has no academic results. But he who strives for certainty for such cognition, what does the such refer to?
The results. The
What-
spiritual and scientific.
No, just the scientific.
Oh.
Yeah. So, it's certainty, not for spirit, but for science. Number 6. Julie?
What is said in the book can be accepted to anyone who, for whatever reasons of his own, does not want anything to do with the results of my spiritual research, scientific research.
Okay, so what kind of people don't want anything to do with his spiritual research?
Scientific.
Yeah, so scientific people. So it's acceptable to normal people, right? Or scientists. Number 7?
To the one, however, who can regard these spiritual scientific results as something toward which he is attracted, what has been attempted here will also be important. So if you're interested in the scientific results, it'll be important.
If you're interested in what kind of results?
Spiritual science.
Yeah, and what kind of people in Steiner's day were interested in?
The anthropology.
Yeah, so this is the anthroposophists, right? Number 7.
This would be the theosophists, right?
Yeah, theosophists, anthroposophists, but basically spiritual people, right? Number 8? Ed?
It is this, to prove how an open-minded consideration of these two questions, which are fundamental for all knowing, leads to the view that the human being lives in a true spiritual world.
What does that mean? So if you have an open-minded consideration of the two questions, you will see that the human being lives in a spiritual world. It will open up your spiritual eyes, right? Because there's no other way to know it. It's not theoretical. So the two questions, if you have an open mind, you see the spirit world. That's a big promise for a man to make about a philosophy book. So if you read just the philosophy book, just the two questions, nothing additional, just read correctly, your spiritual eyes will open. He actually says it, right? Number 9? Marky?
In this book, the attempt is made to justify cognition of the spiritual world before entering into actual spiritual experience.
So he justifies cognition of the spiritual world before spiritual experience. What is cognition of the spiritual world? If there's no spiritual content of the book, then how does he justify that? If your mind thinks in a spiritual way, in the waves, in the interconnections, that's your preparation for living in the spiritual world. So if you're already thinking like an angel, when you actually, your spiritual eyes open up, you'll feel comfortable. Oh, everything's interrelated. Oh, everything's reversed. Everything moves. Nothing ever stays like sedentary, like the earth. So it's spiritual experience. The last sentence?
And this justification is so undertaken that in these chapters one need not look at my later valid experiences in order to find acceptable what is said here, if one is able or wants to enter into this particular style of the writing itself.
So what do you have to do? But enter into the particular style of the writing itself. So how do you have spiritual experience with this book? You just enter into the writing style, right? Not the content, but the writing style.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Were these, was this meant to be discussed out loud and Because it seems more, the more we read it, it seems more understandable when we discuss it. So was the whole purpose was to have study groups?
I think so, because everything Steiner did was to bring people together. So the first stage, you would read, let's say, the first chapter or this preface, you would discuss its meaning. After you've acquainted yourself with what is actually said, then we go next stage into reproducing it and learning the form. And after you've done the form, you would present it in your own words. So it is important to clarify meaning. So in essence, I'm already going to like stage 3 a little bit too quickly. But if you look at this, what do you notice about each level? Because this goes back to what Julian said. What do all the blues have in common? What do all the greens have in common? And what do all the reds have in common?
Well, the 2 questions for the red.
Okay, that was the easiest. So the 2 questions are red, right? Not anywhere else. How about the blues? Oops.
You left out yellow, yeah?
Yellow is truncated. So normally if you have a 7 form, it goes all levels.
Right.
As a 7-fold human being. This is 2 5 forms. So the yellow would be contained in the upper, kind of like theoretically up there. So it doesn't get its own individual sentence. So there is flexibility in this. You can have a 2-sentence, 1-sentence paragraph, upside down paragraph.
Right.
What's the difference between the blue and the green?
Well, science is about the physical world.
So what level is that?
Content is physical stuff.
Yes. So 1893, there are no anthroposophists, right?
I don't know.
Certainty in science, scientists, and how can a scientist find it acceptable? Just by studying the writing style, not joining, right? In 1918, there's no spiritual results. The anthroposophists might find this acceptable because it leads to spiritual experience. So on the blue level is science, the green level is spirit, and on the red level is the individual reading it. So he's speaking to 4 levels. So Julian had said there was a connection between these. And in a certain sense, there is a connection. Does that make sense? Is that a little too much for Saturday evening?
No, it's not too much.
No, it's okay. If you had to make a synopsis of 4, what would it be?
What his intention is,
Okay.
who his listeners are, and what he's trying to accomplish with the writing.
Okay, so intention. And what's the intention for scientists? Right? Certainty in science. How does this thinking give you certainty in science? Anybody have a theory about that?
Well, if you see the interrelatedness of things, then you're not just out there winging it. You've got evidence that supports beyond your...
Exactly.
English
It's
writing.
amazing that you can even say that. Yeah. That's usually, after like years of study. If you can see the interrelatedness of everything as a habit of the mind, you're not baffled by stuff. Right? And that's the problem, is people's thinking is so linear, they keep going out on a limb. And we see that in environmentalism, where they introduce a fish into a lake and they realize that that fish destroys the lake, when that fish was supposed to help the other. Everything we do is like that. Or if you try to fix someone's psychological problem, you end up making it worse because your thinking doesn't see in wholes. You're not trained to consider all aspects at once. And then the spiritual part, right? The intention. Steiner's intention was to give anthroposophists another way of entering into spiritual experience. You guys ready for paragraph 5?
Yeah.
Okay. How many sentences does 5 have?
5.
So what should we expect?
Expect that Marcus has gotten all the answers for us already.
Okay, Marcus, read us sentence 1 really quickly.
This is what I thought about the content of the book when I wrote it down.
No, 5.
This,
My fault.
this philosophy of threehood is not.
No.
What? Oh, I see. Thus, it seems to me that this book, on the one hand, assumes a position completely independent of my actual spiritual, scientific writings. Yet, on the other hand, it also stands in the closest possible connection to them.
Okay, so the book has two positions. It's connected to his writing and not. Number 2, Marcus?
These considerations brought me now, after 25 years, to republish the content of the text almost completely unchanged in all essentials.
So he republished. Was there changes?
Almost none.
Yeah,
Some.
so few, right?
Yep.
And what he did is he changed some of the chapters and he changed the vocabulary to fit his modern anthroposophical society. Marcus, number 3?
I have only made somewhat longer additions to a number of sections.
Okay, he made additions. Okay, so to clarify, including this preface as an addition of sorts. Number 4?
The experiences I made with the incorrect interpretations of what I said caused me to publish comprehensive commentaries.
Was his book understood? No. So the anthroposophist did not understand. Anthroposophist misunderstood his book. He said it himself. And what did he do? The anthroposophical misunderstanding, what did he do to fix that?
He added.
Right. He had to add. Nobody understood his book. Right? They read it and he said in the preface nobody understood. So there it is. There's the fact, right? Number 5, Marky?
I changed only those places where what I said a quarter of a century ago seemed to me inappropriately formulated for the present time.
Okay, so he changed the vocabulary, right? He modernized the phrases, right?
I don't see a structure in that one.
Yeah, it's a hard one, right? The book has 2 positions. What are the 2 positions? The same.
View
Yeah.
and.
Oh no, he has 2 positions. One to his old life, and another one to his spiritual writings. So the book has 2 positions: philosophy and spiritual writings. And what's the difference between the new modernized phrases?
Incorporates the spiritual stuff.
Yeah. So he changed the vocabulary. The book has 2 positions. There are 2 books. One with the old vocabulary, one with the new one, because it's a new edition. How about 2 and 4? Is there any connection between? So, book has 2 positions and 2 editions. One with old words, one with new words.
He republished because of misunderstanding.
Yes, he republished because new understanding. So there you go. You have the problem. The book has 2 positions. The old book was written for scientists, the new book written for anthroposophists. The solution, modernize the phrases for the
said
anthroposophists.
because I thought it was more like, screw you guys, you misunderstood, I ain't gonna change anything.
Right.
That was just me.
No, but that's
I think
basically.
Kate had a better
No, you got it.
interpretation.
That's his humor that you've picked up on that they never pick up on. That's his
But I
black
thought
humor.
she had a much better explanation than
Yeah.
mine.
No, there's not one explanation, but that's totally true. This is him being funny. I mean, haha, right? It's not whatever. Comedy show.
Well, because you would think if somebody misunderstood, you would make more of an effort to change it, but he only did some.
Because what didn't he change? He changed the vocabulary. He put additions. What stayed the same?
I don't know, everything else, his form.
The content, sure, but he added some content. The thinking style stayed the same,
Ooh.
right? The heart logic stays the same. So these are just additional heart logic forms. There's nothing new. There's no new book. What's on the... Why are additions on the ego level? So our form looks like this. Why are additions on the Y level?
Because he was explaining it. He was helping to bring to clarity what he had done.
Okay. And then why are these on the green level?
One is no change, and
Something to study. In the study group, we would go into that. So the additions are kind of like the foundation, the real thing, right? And the other things are more like the position of the book is the what. But this half, addition, sections, vocabulary. And the first half has to do with how the book stands in the world, two kinds, right? The old and new, republished, old and new. So the first half is about the book, the second half is about the changes. So when he wrote his paragraph, that was the game he was playing. He wanted the first half to be about that.
So, I have a question.
Yeah.
Would it be necessary to really understand the preface in order to work through the book? Or could you just go to the book
Well,
without the preface?
because this is the kind of the argument, Julie and I are having, is that can you really understand the preface without having a prior knowledge that the book could be written in forms? Or does the preface now make sense once you have an idea that Steiner's talking not about content, but the way the content has been laid out?
okay, I have a question on that. If his whole idea is that things written in a certain, what you want to say, spiritual form, what he called spiritual form, bring about greater understanding, then the book should have worked the first time. People should have gotten it. Obviously, the things written in the way that he wrote them only led to misunderstanding. I shouldn't say only, led to many misunderstandings.
Okay, so let's say if you read... How can I put it?
In
Okay,
other
there's
words,
two reasons why
Tiger-
people didn't understand it. One, because he's doing something completely new. Number two, he was tongue-tied because of his spiritual stature. You have to ask the teacher the question. He tried to hint at it. This preface is a hint. So if you had read this preface and you were his friend, you would say, actually, I don't understand what you mean by a living answer. Could you please show me? It's so incomprehensible. So the only thing you could imagine is that it's a philosophy book. You're supposed to read it and you have a couple of new ideas and then you move on. Okay, I believe the human being's free. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying that, sure. But actually, if you read the book carefully, he says it's almost impossible to be free.
But let me
There's so few moments in your life where
if
you're
I remember
actually
from
free.
last week, Tiger poem seems to elicit something in people that they're not expecting or aware of because of the form. According to what you said. The Our Father is a powerful prayer because it's got this form and nobody necessarily recognizes it, but they feel it resonates in them. Should his book not have resonated with people? Because it's written in the form.
Oh, I see.
I'm asking this question as is this thus therefore?
I can only talk about myself. When I first read this book for content, I absolutely enjoyed it. I even copied out the chapters. I loved the argument. I wrote my dad a series of letters on every single chapter. I was like, this is the greatest philosophy book ever. It answers every single question I could ever have. So I had that initial enthusiasm. Then when I found that it had a form, that made it even better. But part of my take now as a teacher is I can still have enthusiasm for the content of the book. But that's going to be few and far between. What I would like people to do is get interested in the thinking that's behind the book. So I changed my emphasis. But I still remember there was something about the way he writes that does move you. Now you have to put the time in, Tiger, Burning Bright is very short and crisp, like a good song. It doesn't burden you. But, it's not the Rime of the Ancient Sea Mariner that goes on for like 6 pages, right? That's not usually a poem that you want to sit down and share with your friends. It's like, reading Dickens before you go to bed, puts you right to sleep. So, but, why did Steiner have so many followers, there was something, they did say when he lectured, he put them to sleep. But they said after they had experienced several of his lectures, they developed the inner strength and really enjoyed what he had to say. And there's this very famous quote of a man who went to a Steiner lecture, because he was doing this all the time. And he said, listening to Steiner, I could feel the symphonic form. He really was able to feel the ideas interconnecting.
Okay, that answers my question, actually.
Right?
Okay.
But as it is new, it's hard to digest, because what I'm trying to tell you is that these forms have existed, we forgot about them, and we got to remember them. We got to reincorporate them. It has power. The advertising industry is already using this.
So would you say that this form, and so it's kind of circular and has like a musical quality to it, and just that quality is has like a subliminal spiritual effect. So it sort of reinforces this interconnectedness and a balance in the world.
If you study it, it does. So for example, let's say you start to go through the book. You'll have a first chapter. And let's say, I'll just draw the chapter. It has 19 paragraphs. And what I would ask you to do is really begin to see in your mind's eye the entire structure. So if I ask you, Ed, what is in paragraph 16? Now you can't look at the book. Where are you going to look? Oh, paragraph 16 is yellow. Oh, I know what that is. And then you would be able to have a different type of memory. You're not going back in your mind, you're going forward in the form. So your entire cognitive faculty changes. You're now being able to take enormous amounts of content and condense it into these geometric forms and move freely in those forms by practicing it. And then when you no longer have that chapter in front of you, you still have the activity without the content. You will become, in the beginning you'll actually notice you can read things you couldn't read before because your mind is awake. That was my first experience. After I had studied this for a couple months, I could pick up a philosophy book that wouldn't put me to sleep. But you'll also be able to listen differently because of that activity of comparing. Listening to other people tell you the same content in their own words. So there's a lot of skills that open up in a relatively short time. And then your thinking becomes organic. You learn to really start to see your own ideas one after the other and interconnected. And that has a healing effect on you. That's how we supposedly thought in past lifetimes in Egypt. This was natural for us. But the modern mind is disconnected. We have to win this back. We're taking back what we used to do naturally. Have a harmonious mind. If that makes any sense.
That's kind of what he says about Latin, that it's like he's trying to kind of get us from the Latin that's kind of taking
the
hold.
automatism.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the opposite of automatism, because you can freely move in this tableau. So let's say if we were studying, like we're studying today, see how you have these catchwords? Those catchwords will just become colors. And out of those colors you can recall the entire preface. So it's like a musical scale. Once you know how to play the musical scale, you don't need to look at the notes. Or churning. You ever play piano? You have the churning book that has all the finger exercises? Right, once you know how to do that, you have those skills. That's the same thing with this. So you're practicing your thinking scales of qualitative thinking. So you're thinking now in terms of qualities, what, how, why. And then each chapter has a different what, how, why. And each chapter has a different interrelation. So you're learning, let's say if you do the whole book, you're learning hundreds of different polarity possibilities. And when you're finished with the book, you won't recall a single one. But you'll have that ability to see in polarity. What's inside over here is outside over there. So your thinking becomes dynamic. That's really what it's about. And this had to be done in Buddhism, in certain Jewish traditions. I mean, they have thought exercises. Except this one is kind of for modern man. You read a philosophy book, you find out that you're free, You're happy that your thinking is powerful. You go into life with a new enthusiasm. So this is kind of like the old spiritual path hidden in a philosophy book. If that makes any sense.
So are we going to do 6?
Ready to do 6? Andrew, did you find anything in 6?
I really struggled with it. I didn't.
Yeah, in
Get
the
what I
beginning,
thought,
it's good.
'cause
You know,
I
I
wasn't
must
sure.
admit, I had a group in California, and they grasped these interrelations really quickly. And today we're really going to have to really build the steps. The book's changes, is that okay for paragraph 5? Okay, Kate, read me 6.
The book has been sold out for many years.
Okay, book, sold out. Read sentence 2.
I nevertheless hesitated for a long time with the completion of this new edition, and it seems to me, in following the line of thought in the previous section, that today the same should be expressed which I asserted 25 years ago in reference to these questions.
So did he put something new or the same?
Same. I mean,
Same
thing as 25
They
years
just
ago.
expressed it differently.
Same book, right? Expressed differently. Okay, so nothing terribly new there. 3?
I have asked myself again and again whether I might not discuss several topics of the numerous contemporary philosophical views put forward since the publication of the first edition.
So he asked himself.
Yeah.
So Steiner considered new views, right? See, so the new philosophers, they didn't really talk about freedom or thinking, right? They were interested in other things, right? Number 4?
To do this in a way acceptable to me was impossible in recent times because of the demands of my pure spiritual scientific research.
So why was it impossible?
Because he was doing this on his own spiritual.
Yeah, so he was busy, right? Impossible spirit research, right? 5?
Yet I have convinced myself now, after a most intense review of present-day philosophical work, that as tempting as such a discussion in itself would be.
What? It's a ridiculous sentence, right?
Well, it's like he's talking to you.
Yeah.
It is for what should be said through my book, not to be included in the same.
Okay, so he did a survey of philosophical literature, and what did he decide?
That it would be tempting to talk about, but he decided.
Right, doesn't fit, right?
The same.
So not fitting. Because why? They didn't talk about freedom, right?
Yeah. So, like, for instance, so he wouldn't have talked about, at that time, would it have been Nietzsche?
Yeah, and he wrote a book on Nietzsche. Nietzsche was close, but there were a lot of other kind of philosophy. Not Hebart was much earlier. Who was it? Wittgenstein. But you know, they were interested in other things. Also, a lot of materialistic philosophies came out. 6.
What seemed to me necessary to say, from the point of view of the philosophy of freedom, about the most recent philosophical directions can be found in the second volume. So he puts those things in his second volume called Riddles of Philosophy.
Okay, so what he needed to say from the point of view of the philosophy of freedom, Riddles of Philosophy, is the second book, right? Now look at this. Do you see a polarity between 1 and 6?
This book was sold out.
Well,
so-
current book and new book.
Yeah. Current book,
yeah.
new book,
Book,
right?
book.
See, and he doesn't do it in a dogmatic way. Each time is different, the way he begins and ends a prose. So, his old book is sold out. He just happens to have, 2 new books. Whatever way. There's many ways you could see it. How about between 2 and 5?
Well, it seems like, going back to what he said that his book was sold out. So that means that a lot of people were reading it.
He only had like 500 copies made.
Uh,
Yes. Okay, I said the same thing. I said, oh, it wasn't sold out. He wrote the book in 1893. Nobody bought it until like 1917. It was a total failure, you know? I mean, his book on the threefold social order went to like 6 editions when he was still alive. Theosophy through like 5 editions. But Philosophy of Freedom, no one wanted to read.
Oh, so it wasn't reprinted for all those.
For all those years, over 20 years. There was no need to reprint it. It was in like the back shelf. Or people politely said, "Oh, Dr. Steiner, I read your philosophy book. Thank you so much," but they didn't read it, right? And what's the between 2 and 5?
He hesitated
With what?
with the same, about just like republishing the same book,
Yeah.
but then decided that it wasn't fitting, so he.
Exactly. So you have problem, solution, right? Problem, solution. That's his formula for this paragraph. On the left are the problems. The book is sold out, he doesn't know what to do, and he considered some new things. Then he answers, it's impossible, anyway he's busy, none of the new views fit, and he already wrote a book about those views. You see how when the editor said, is any of this necessary? Does he actually tell you what he did here? Or did he tell you what he didn't do? Who writes like that? Today I didn't go shopping, and after I didn't go shopping I didn't watch TV, because I didn't watch TV because I didn't have a TV guide, and if I had had a TV guide I would have used last week's anyway because the programs never change. That's not talking to people, that's a negative content. Right? So why does he write like that, right? And that's the thing, it's pure form. Where's the actual preface here, right?
Oh, I see. So the whole thing actually builds up from problem, solution, really.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's answering
1, 2, 3, 4.
questions before he's answering the questions that he anticipates. Like,
Right,
why
right.
didn't you add the new views? And he's just saying, well, it's impossible. I couldn't, and I wrote another book, and it's in this other book. So can I read that?
Yeah. And where's, like, okay, so what would you say number 6's meaning is? How would you condense that?
He reasons why he kept the book.
Give me a condensement. So the book is sold out, he considers adding new philosophies, and in conclusion, where's the actual thing that he did?
He kept the philosophy of freedom
Okay, he kept the philosophy and he wrote another book, right?
to solve the problem.
So we have 2 books actually, right?
So it's like he's making, he's not discounting, but it just didn't fit into.
Right, but he also says that he had a book about other worldviews. Out of the point of view of the philosophy of freedom, I already published Riddles of Philosophy.
And it's the second edition, the second volume.
Second volume, yeah. So he went through all of this just to say he already did what he was thinking about doing, or it was sufficient. It's not really a new content.
Question.
Go ahead.
So, do you think it's possible that some of these sentences are really long, so many of them, because he tried to keep the structure?
Yeah, now, Ed, this is an important thing. Steiner was a master at this. So when you're looking at, you know how a sentence is so long? Each one of those clauses makes a level.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, before when I was a journalist and I was editor, I would be like, you know, say, hey, this sentence is too long. I want 2 or 3. Let's break it down. But this is.
And it's because it's an educational purpose. He was educating people in this new thinking. For example, Steiner has a book called, a chapter called Optimism and Pessimism. In the Philosophy of Freedom, it's 52 paragraphs. In his first book, he has a chapter called Optimism and Pessimism. It's 2 paragraphs. So 2 paragraphs is enough to cover optimism and pessimism in his old book. So I guess the point is that he made that chapter so long course, to give it emphasis artistically in his new book, but it's really about the form. You could say whatever. So, should you be optimistic or pessimistic in your opinion? Optimistic, right? It makes more sense, unless pessimism somehow gives you some great life forces, like, with Nietzsche's comment about the Greeks. So, it's about educating people. And you also notice those sentences are very long. Why are they so long in the last paragraph? That's a question. I don't have the answer to that. But I've noticed that. They're so long and they say very little. So what you're able to do, there's also, if you reread and rewrite those sentences, you'll see that they'll kind of go, I hesitated with writing the book, da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da. It will follow what, how, why. In his other books, like, he'll have very short sentences, crispy sentences. In another book, he'll use quotes a lot. So each book gives you opportunities to develop your own style. He gives you suggestions on how you can use this thinking in a modern world, like writing world. If that makes
this
sense.
was also written before books like The Elements of Style.
Right. Right, but he is the ultimate stylist, He did write a play, he did write poetry. His poems are very terse, and sometimes they're just like adverbs. He doesn't use verbs, which is common in German. And then in those, each line has one of those qualities, like what, how, why, who. And there's exceptions. His poetry is not that easy.
Can you give an example of using an adverb without using
Here, the sun, glowingly. And then I would go on. The bird. In German, it's somehow acceptable to do that. Hegel did that a lot. So it's like they accused Steiner of a Hegelian style. So the sun glowingly, the birds sing. So you can talk that way in German. It's acceptable. Yeah. So how do you translate that into English, right? If there's no real verb, then you'd have to say the sun is glowing, right? So, but that's not what he wrote. When you use an adverb, there's something very static about it. Adverbs limit movement. So when you have an adverbial phrase or clause tied down to a sentence, it slows it down, it weighs it. If you have subject action verb, it brings it into movement. If you use a conditional or some feeling verbs, it has a red, a Y level. So there's actually a grammar to writing in these levels that Steiner uses. Of course, he always changes it up.
Would it change in the translation? Like
This translation is very strict. It's literal out of the German. There's no playing with sentences so that people could model their style, practice. That's the problem with almost all the Steiner books, is they changed his paragraphs, his sentences.
So then are you able to follow the form still?
No, the books are useless. In terms of this, he used to have a lot of dashes, and a lot of editions took out the dashes. Dashes were his way. When he was younger, he was playing, and he wanted people to notice whether the dash was a new paragraph or not. How do you know if the dash makes a new paragraph? By reading it, by comparing it. Is it a new idea, or is the dash a parenthetical remark? So he played a lot with punctuation in really kind of great ways. That makes sense. Any other questions? All right, so our final form, just give me 1 minute. So if we look here, you have the 2 questions, understanding, knowledge, intention, book changes. What is the first half of the preface about versus the second half?
So,
First half is about, I don't know, like your experience, life stuff. The second half is about the book.
the 2 views.
Okay, which is which? So let's go through it. So you have the questions, you have the answer, and you have the knowledge, right? The value.
Right?
Then what is this about? Intention, book changes, 2 books.
That's something else.
There's a lot to ask in one evening.
Well, can you just put it, so would you put 1, 2,
Okay, let's tell you, I could put them down so you can see them better. So here you have paragraph 1-9. You have the 2 questions. You have paragraph 2-5. Not theoretical answer, right? Living answer. In paragraph 3, you have the value of the knowledge, right? And now what does paragraph 4 do that's new? What pronoun is used in paragraph 4 for the first time?
Pronoun?
Yeah.
That's a long one. I don't remember what.
I?
Yeah, I. So
Oh.
why does Steiner start with I here? Why is there no I on paragraph 1, 2, and 3? What's the effect of that on the reader? What happens when you move to paragraph 4? So in paragraph 1 he talks about the 2 questions, but there's no he, mine, she, I, right? Living answer, and then the knowledge. There's no real person mentioned. Then he says, this is what I thought about the book. So this half of the book is written in the 3rd person. I'm sorry. This half of the preface is written in the 1st person. What effect does that have if this is 3rd person and this is 1st person? Let me just give you a little taste of how exaggerated this is. This is what I thought about the content of the book when I wrote it down 25 years ago. Today, too, I have to write down sentences. If I want to carry, he uses 2 I's in each sentence. What kind of writing style is that? Editor? Right? 2 full clauses. So this is not a good writing style. But why did he write that way? What was he doing to the reader? So here, which part is the inner part, which part is the outer part, the left or the right? So, I'm sorry. So we have the intention.
The inner part is the left.
The inner part is the inner part of what? The left, you said. The inner part of what? The person, the author, or the book?
They're us.
Really? Look again. I know what you mean. There's no right answer to this, though.
Humans. Soul.
What does paragraph 1 discuss? I know what you mean, because you said there's a soul region, right? But it's not your soul region, it's one you gotta find in the book.
Oh, so it's not.
No, so the 3rd person, this is the inner book. 2 questions, an answer, and its value, right? And this is the inner what? Whose inner is paragraph 4 through?
Personal. His personal.
Yeah, it's Steiner's inner. And what's the outer part here? So inner Steiner, inner book. What's the outer part here?
What a said all of that was outer. Steiner outer.
So this is, okay, so inner Steiner is the I, what he thought, right? What's the outer aspect on this side, and what's the, so we have the inner book and the outer
Expression.
how the book met the public.
Yeah.
So the inner book meets the outer public. And you can switch these. So what's outer about this? This is the reader. How the reader addresses it. So inner book, outer reader, inner Steiner, outer public. Does that make sense? A little much for a morning. Or evening.
It's morning now.
No, I know, I was laughing. I was like, what time is it? And then you have two books. I know this is a lot for now. But the first thing, you have the third person and the content of the book. And then you have the first person and the public's reaction, and Steiner's reaction to the content of the book. Does that make sense? And so what he does is he, in this example, uses the first person to turn the thought form inside out. So we're in the Our Father prayer, give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, and all of a sudden in the second half we come into all these relationships. Same thing here. Fourth paragraph, he starts to aggressively use the word I, turns the thought form inside out. So that's a trick you could use in your next letter. So in the next letter you write, you talk about the outer aspects. Oh, living in Hawaii is great, the weather's fine, da-da-da. And the midpoint you would say, oh, I just bought a new car, I'm going to visit my friends, and then you... So this is kind of a model for this new thinking.
So, do you write like this?
Yeah.
He texts like this.
No, I mean, let's be honest. You have to put work into it. Of course, I've been doing this since I was, since 1994. So I had a lot of experience with this.
No, I mean, I think that you would start to...
But, like, when I had to write this book, which I wouldn't consider a model, I wrote it over 20 times. It tortured me, right? And I wanted to correct it. I wanted to make every paragraph coherent and organic. Now, would I set up as a model to study? Never. But it's my model. It's what I used. It made me, when I went down to write it, I felt like, this paragraph really goes through the levels.
It
I hope
should have
this
been
touches
your
someone.
process. I get it. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And to be fair to Steiner, not too many of us are going to ring these bells the way he did. That's his gift. Yeah, George was pretty close. George O'Neill, the man who discovered it, wrote The Human Life. He could do that too. He could see a chapter and then write it down. He didn't use notes. He really understood this process. He grew up hanging around Hemingway and great writers, so he was in that milieu. So, I'm not a writer. Someone else probably should have written this book, But in a certain sense, it's really good because my stupidity helps me really see it kind of with the young people's eyes, not with sophistication in some way.
How is this different from your first book?
My first book was like on Waldorf. How Steiner actually wanted the Waldorf school to incorporate this thinking as its main purpose, not as a subsidiary. So he wanted the teachers to think this way and then to model this thinking. Not just know about child development and good things like that, but he actually wanted the teachers, when they did their lesson plans, when they speak, to use this thinking all the time. So now the only time, you can see it in Steiner's lesson plans. Steiner had a threefold lesson plan, right? So first you consider the facts of the physics experiment, then you repeat them, and the next day you go over and discover the lawfulnesses, so you have like a what, how, why. And he even went as far as to say that the lesson plan fits the threefold human being, body, soul, and spirit. But, it was an abstraction. But yeah, the curriculum has these forms. Lesson plan, where they're appropriate. New organic thinking is not appropriate everywhere, but it's definitely appropriate for the... Steiner was trying to found the new logic. And he was hoping that one of his institutions would pick it up. A Christian community, Dornoch, or somewhere. But none of them picked it up. So it died, you know. Well, George wasn't so vocal. And it stayed kind of secret. So we're still at that stage of kind of the baby shoes of this new thinking. That makes sense. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Thanks,
it.
Mark.